We knew him when. I'd like to read to you starting from John chapter 15, verse 26. But I will send you the advocate. This is Jesus speaking. But I will send you the advocate, the Spirit of truth. He will come to you from the Father and will testify all about me. And you must also testify about me because you have been with me from the beginning of my ministry. I've told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith. For you will be expelled from the synagogues. And the time is coming when those who kill you will think they are doing a holy service for God. This is because they have never known the Father or me. Yes, I'm telling you these things now so that when they happen, you will remember my warning. I didn't tell you earlier because I was going to be with you for a while longer. You know, there are, in my opinion, few greater threats to our personal well-being, to our sense of contentment and security, our meaningful relationships, even our purpose in life. There are few greater daily threats than the threat of rejection. Oh, don't get me wrong, there may be greater threats relationally, psychologically, physically, even socially, but those don't tend to happen on a daily basis. See, that's the thing with rejection. Not only can rejection happen on a daily basis, rejection can happen on an hourly basis. And when rejection happens, it attacks our sense of well-being. And it's not just the rejections that are like a really big deal. It can be the little rejections stacked up, right? Like you're in a long checkout line when your credit card gets rejected, right? And then they're like, sorry, it's rejected. And they seem to raise their voice when they say that. Have you noticed? The cashiers, I'm sorry, this card was rejected. Attention, aisle 5, this card was, right? And you're looking around all embarrassed like you should apologize when they run it again. And it's like, oh, it was the machine. So my card wasn't rejected, you know? But they don't say that part, right? The only thing all the people around you think is that you tried to use a card that was maxed out. And if it's not that, maybe it's during the work day when you are talked over in a conversation. I mean, you're just stepped on. You're given a good idea and somebody comes in because they think that everything they say is a good idea, and they just walk on what you said, and no one even really seems to notice. That's a form of rejection. Or for some of us who still go out for recess like I do, you know, kids refuse to play with you. That's a form of rejection. Kids think that your tennis shoes aren't as cool as theirs. Form of rejection. There are all of these opportunities to be rejected. And there are deeper rejections. Many of those, by the way, those deeper ones, the ones that leave the most lasting scars, have the greatest influence on us, happened when we were children, or happened when we were adolescents. It was in those times that the rejection, that lasting wound, shaped our sense of identity and acceptability. I mean, if we were to think of it as a building that we need or want to enter. Maybe the door was closed for us because of the color of our skin, or the accent of our voice, or our level of education, or our socioeconomic status, or our gender, or our country of origin. And that door being locked to us because of characteristics of our own person that we cannot change. That experience of exclusion, day in and day out, scars us deeply. But then to imagine beyond that, beyond the locked door and the place you wish to come in, comes the personal rejection. Well, that's the note under the door. It's the piece of paper, the slip of paper under the door, specifically for us individually. It has our name on it, and we pick it up to read it, and it says, "You are not wanted. You are not accepted. You are simply not enough," or worse yet, "You are too much." Now, you might be thinking, come on, Ron, this isn't that big of a deal. People just need to grow a tougher skin. You know, don't take no for an answer. Push through whatever the rejection is. Life is tough. Get on with it. Which is great. It really is. It's great, except for the fact that the Clint Eastwood approach to social, emotional, relational help is about as helpful as trying to draw on him in one of his spaghetti westerns. I mean, you could do it, but why would you? So I did a bit of research on the subject, and as you might expect, I found some interesting stuff to share with you. Now, the foundational theoretical architecture, I put that in there just because I wanted to say that in public. The foundational theoretical architecture for understanding rejection and its impact comes from a fellow named Kipling Williams. His research was entitled The Temporal Need Threat Model. And it holds that humans have a fundamental need to belong, or a desire to be socially connected to others, which makes sense, right? I could have gotten a PhD for saying that. But the truth is, we all want somewhere to belong. We want a group to belong to, a place to call home, right? And when the rejection, that social exclusion, comes to the places where we want to belong, then we simply refer to that rejection, that rejection simply impacts 4 fundamental psychological needs: belonging, self-esteem, control, and meaningful existence. So you see, rejection isn't simply a social inconvenience. It's an assault on the architecture of ourselves. How we see ourselves, our identity, our sense of belonging, our self-esteem, our control, and our sense of meaningful existence. That's what's under attack when we're rejected. And you remember how I said that events of rejection, the younger we are, they tend to leave the deepest scars? Well, there's a thing evidently called the Ericksonian stakes. Sounds like a horse race, I know. But check this out. According to this fella, Erik Erikson, who is evidently a big deal in these child psychology circles, he says that the main task of adolescence is to resolve the crisis of identity versus role confusion. In other words, he says, our main deal when we're teenagers is to figure out who we are. That is our main purpose as teenagers. And a stable, strong sense of identity is associated with better mental health. It's not just that it's good to have a sense of identity. It's important for how you develop as a human being, who you become as an adult. And here's what's interesting. Peers, your friends as you're growing up, and others in your classes, they're not just background noise during the process. They are, as he says, the primary workshop in which our identity is hammered out. And so Erickson's whole big deal here is he expounds on what is at stake as teenagers try to find their identity. He says when rejection enters the workshop of their identities, it doesn't merely slow the work, it corrupts the raw material. If during this critical time of identity formation, the young person's behaviors, cognitions, meaning their thinking, and affects, meaning their feelings, their emotions, if they do not comply with the peer group's expectations and requirements, the adolescent may experience rejection, ridicule, even bullying, rather than the sense of belonging, nurture, and connectedness optimally provided by that group. And again, everyone has this experience in childhood and adolescence. I mean, all of us have, there's surely been at least one group in your preteen and teenage years that you tried to belong to and you couldn't, right? And if you're one of the unfortunate ones to have ever been bullied, you remember it. No matter how old you are, I bet it wouldn't take you very long at all to think of a time when you were bullied. I am 61 years old. 50 years ago. And I remember it like that. 50 years ago. And I can tell you about when I was bullied. If you were ever embarrassed publicly because of an overt rejection by a group of teenagers in power, you still remember it. I bet you wouldn't have to work so hard to think of some of those experiences, you know, being made fun of, called fat, skinny, slow, stupid, weird, loser, liar, fake, weirdo. You can remember at least some of those, right? And after all these years, after 30, 40, 50 years, there must be a reason why you can remember that and you can't remember what you ate for lunch on Friday. The reason is because those rejections that we experienced as adolescents, they don't stay on the outside of us. We internalize them. We take what other people have said and we embrace it and internalize it and say, that's the verdict on me. That's who I am. I'm too fat. I'm too slow. I'm a grave disappointment to everyone who matters. I'm awkward. I'm ugly. You name it. Now, you might be thinking right now, is this a sermon or is this a lecture on social, emotional, and physical impact of rejection on adolescent formation and its corresponding impact on adulthood? Well, when you put it that way, it may be both. It might be both. Just stay with me for 3 more minutes. I promise I'm going to connect this to Jesus, all right? This is where the rubber hits the road, right here. There's this thing called the rejection sensitivity model. And it basically says early experiences of rejection can lead to expectations of future rejection and to placing a high importance on avoiding rejection. You experience rejection, and as you get older, you become afraid of it, and you do whatever you can to avoid it. And once an individual has developed the disposition to anxiously expect, readily perceive, and intensely react to rejection, they are at risk of interpreting ambiguous social situations as evidence of their rejection. They're at risk of having a more intense reaction to what they perceive as rejection, whether it was truly rejection or not. In practice, this means a rejected adolescent becomes a hyper-vigilant adult, reading betrayal and ambiguity and anticipating abandonment in what are ordinary circumstances and distance. The rejection sensitivity model draws on attachment theory to suggest that when parents fail to meet children's articulated needs, children become hypervigilant to rejection and anxiously expect rejection from others. And repeated rejection experiences increase people's expectations. The expectation that others will not accept them. The person most afraid or maybe most damaged, more appropriately, the person most afraid or damaged by rejection behaves in ways that cause them to be hypervigilant, to withdraw, and to have hostile preemption, meaning they blow up at someone before they have the chance to reject them. So, we've all been damaged by rejection. Some of us more than others. If you've had an abusive parent or negligent parent or been in an abusive, negligent relationship, then the impact comes even greater. Now that our minor little tour of recent research on the effect of rejection is done, look at verses 1 and 2 of John 16 for me. John 16, verse 1. I've told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith. For you will be expelled from the synagogues, and the time is coming when those who kill you will think they are doing a holy service for God. We're coming to the closing chapters of Jesus' last words and instructions to his disciples and his followers before his arrest and humiliation and torture and crucifixion. And Jesus says something to the boys in which they were not prepared to hear. Jesus, in effect, says, because you are my followers, you will be rejected. And you will be rejected in the worst possible ways. You will be publicly expelled from the synagogues. And Jesus wasn't talking about them being thrown out by some first century bouncer, okay? He means the door to the synagogue, which is the center of life for Jews who don't live close to the temple. The door will be closed to them. The synagogue is the epicenter of life for a Jew. Spirituality, relationally, socially, just about every way you can think of it. And so to be removed from the synagogue is to be removed from life as you know it. And Jesus says, not only will you be removed because you're a follower of His, not only are they going to reject you in the most public ways, the rejection will become so great that people will kill you and think they're doing something beautiful for God. That is the rejection Jesus says they're about to experience. And Jesus' words in verse 2 make verse 1 all the more important, right? Because you know that He's prepared them before He's made this statement. And so verse 1 says, I've told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith. And I can imagine them after they heard the part about being thrown out of the synagogue and, beaten and cursed and treated like him and even killed, and people thinking they did something for God by killing them. I can just imagine those fellows going, wait, what was that first part again? When He says, I've told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith. I can just imagine them going, wait, what things? What? Wait. What things did He tell us so that we wouldn't abandon our faith? I mean, the level of rejection that Jesus is talking about in verse 2 makes abandon your faith a reasonable possibility. So I go back to my first question. What does Jesus mean when He says, I've told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith? What things has He told them? And then it occurred to me, wait a second. We've been spending the last months studying the things that He told them. When He says that at the very beginning of chapter 16, he's referencing the 3 chapters that came before, the ones that we have studied so carefully together. And then all of a sudden I thought, we probably know what He told them that was going to help them keep from stumbling in their faith and abandoning their faith. And then I thought, well, okay, so He started out with washing their feet, right? I mean, this is how much He said, I love you. I will do what has to be done, even if it's the nastiest job that needs doing. You are not beneath me. So, love each other the way I have loved you. That's what happens in John 13, right? He washes their feet. And then in John 14, He says, starting with verse 1, He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Now, they're going to be really glad they remembered this when they get to chapter 16, right? Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I'll come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. And you know the way to where I am going. He says, you know how much I love you and accept you? I want you to live in my house with me. I want you to live in my Father's house with me for eternity. You will always be with me for eternity. You will be where I am. That is the definition of acceptance. I want to spend eternity with you. Then a little further down, in chapter 14, Jesus tells the disciples, listen, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to abandon you as orphans, which would be a major form of rejection. I won't do that. Instead, I will send you the Holy Spirit, who is your advocate. He's your counselor. He's your comforter. He's your encourager. And He will be with you and in you. And He is also a healer and a protector. And then you remember that part in 14, a couple of months ago we read, verse 27, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift that the world cannot give, so don't be troubled or afraid. Remember what I told you, I'm going away, but I will come back to you again. If you really loved me, you'd be happy that I'm going to the Father who is greater than I am. I have told you these things before they happen, so that when they do happen, you will believe. Peace of mind and peace of heart. And he says, and the peace I give is a gift that the world cannot give you. So don't be troubled or afraid. Troubled and afraid. Those are two of the great products of all the rejections that have ever happened in our lives. But Jesus promises to give us peace of mind and heart. Or as Paul says, he promises to give us the peace that transcends, that goes beyond all understanding. And then there's chapter 15 where Jesus says that he is the vine and we are the branches. You belong to me and I belong to you, right? We are in him and he is in us. Everything you need to produce fruit in this life comes from Jesus. He told us that. And not only does Jesus, have a home to share with us, but we are connected. He brought us in. He made us a part. And then we discover that we are in Jesus and Jesus in us. And if we remain in him and he in us, then we are guaranteed acceptance and love from God the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then later in John 15, verse 16, he says, you didn't choose me, I chose you. You didn't choose me. I chose you. I love sometimes to imagine being in this huge football stadium. So one of the only times I ever imagined being in the Ohio State football stadium, because it's so massive, right? You know, I don't know, what is it, 85,000 people or something like that? And I imagine it just being packed, right? Just being packed. And like I'm way up in the nosebleeds, right? And Jesus walks out to the middle of the football field, right? You know, where their stupid logo is. And Jesus, he looks up into this massive crowd. And then I could swear to you, he looked my direction. 85,000 people. And he found me up there in the nosebleed. And he said, hey, Ron, come here. Let's have a chat. That's what I think of sometimes when I read this. You didn't choose me, but I chose you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd love to be chose. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. He says to them, I picked you, I chose you, and I gave you my name. And then he says, because you're going to be rejected, you're going to be hated, everything that has happened to me will happen to you. Verse 26, but I will send you the advocate, the Spirit of truth. He will come to you from the Father and will testify all about me. And you must also testify about me because you have been with me from the beginning of my ministry. The important part here is the sequence. Jesus gives us the Holy Spirit before they start hating on us. Jesus gives us the Holy Spirit before they start rejecting us. Jesus gives us the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, to wage war on all those lies in your head and all the accusations and ridicule and rejection that has been thrown at you and stuck in your life. One of the greatest parts of belonging is having a role, having a purpose, not just being told to tag along, but I have a job for you. And that's exactly what Jesus does. Jesus says to us, you are such a part of me that I want you to tell people all about me, and the Holy Spirit will help you by leading you into all truth. That's some of what Jesus meant when he said in verse 1, I have told you these things so that you won't abandon your faith. There's this researcher by the name of Glenn Elder. His area of expertise is life course theory. I didn't even know that there was life course theory. But even within his life course theory, there's something called resiliency theory. And his theory, the question has got to come to you. If all of us experience rejection, and all of us experience deep rejection, then what keeps us from self-destructing? What just keeps us from just melting down? He said the things that keep us from being destroyed by all the rejections in our lives is all the acceptance in our lives. Now, he doesn't call it acceptance. He calls it a protective factor or a turning point that interrupts what would otherwise be a predictable negative trajectory. The advocate is the protective factor. The advocate is the turning point in our lives. Not only does he protect us from the pain and wreckage of rejection, but the Holy Spirit of God is the healer of our past damaged identities, understandings of ourselves that have been damaged from the past, those heartbreaking memories of being rejected that we can still call up on a moment's notice 55 years later. Remember, it was Jesus who said, come unto me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Take my yoke upon me and learn from me, for my burden is easy and my yoke is light. And there you will find rest for your souls. No matter how many doors have been closed to us, no matter how many notes have been slipped under the door saying you aren't wanted, Jesus says you are wanted. Jesus says you are wanted by him. Jesus says he has a house for you and love for you, and he offers himself to you to be your protector, your counselor, your comforter, and your friend. And he will wipe every tear. He will heal the wounds you carry with you. And the only thing you have to do to not let the rejections in your life define you is turn to him and ask him to heal what's been broken for such a long time. And if it's going to take a while to heal, you ask him for grace to get through tomorrow. Because with Jesus, we are not the sum of our rejections. We are the sum of our acceptance. I hope you think about that.